How much sleep are you getting on average? By the end of this podcast or video, wherever you're watching or listening, you're going to have 3 tips to improve your sleep hygiene. Hey, it's Jonno White here, founder of Clarity. We help leaders around the world, and I want to welcome you to Leadership Question of the Day. It's great to have you with us, and thank you so much for following, liking, sharing, subscribing. If you haven't done that yet, please do that now. Wherever you're watching or listening, please click that subscribe, follow, like, share button. It helps us help more leaders like you to become the very best you can be. So today I'm asking you about sleep, and I want to ask you, I want you to think about it. How much sleep are you getting on average? And the reason I want to ask you this is I think sleep is severely underrated. You know, when we think of leadership, which is what this podcast is about, we often think strategy, we think team, we think character and humility, we think about getting away with the team. But I remember, for me, when I first came across some materials that really challenged me about sleep, when I read it, and it really shocked me. And the thing that shocked me was this idea that sleep is so important that if they look at the research, when you're a student, you're actually better off sleeping in for an extra couple of hours than waking up a couple of hours early, breaking your sleep and cramming that last little bit. And that to me just shocked me, because when you're a student, whether you're in school or university, you always assume to get the best out of yourself in an exam that you just want to get as much in your head as you can. And I think we do the same as leaders. To get the best out of ourselves as leaders, we just need to have pedal to the metal and just go as hard as we can. But I came across another book the other day that was really interesting. I can't remember what it's called, so I'm just going to give you some of the principle that stood out to me from this book. But it really challenged me in this area to think differently about sleep. And the big idea was that sleep, there's 3 different types of sleep that we get when we're asleep, which I've heard of before. But the first one is the deep sleep that we have. And the deep sleep in this book, the author compared it to like a postal service. And the deep sleep is when we go into this deep sleep, it's like all those different packages from the day get sent out to storage. And so if you don't have deep sleep, or you don't get enough deep sleep, the things that have happened through your day, through the week, aren't going to be sorted as well and stored as well. And the author even talked about, sleep deprivation, or just not sleeping as well as we could be, which the author mentioned as 7 to 9 hours of sleep on average. That when we're not getting enough sleep, we're actually losing things that should be stored, that could be stored better, because we're not getting that deep sleep. And then the author talked about light sleep being the cleansing. This is the type of sleep where what's happening in our mind is things are getting throw that out, get rid of that. And it's like our brain decides what it can get rid of. And then, of course, you have the REM sleep. And REM sleep, the author of this book was talking about how REM sleep is where the dots get connected. REM sleep is where patterns are found. It's where, okay, that's stored and that's stored, but what if we combine these together? And I love the story that the author mentioned in this book, which was about Paul McCartney waking up and having the whole melody to Yesterday in his head and thinking that someone else had written it, and he must have been just remembering a song he'd heard, because in that REM sleep different patterns had connected and this melody had come out of it, which is really cool when you hear a song that's as beautiful as Yesterday and think, well, sleep played a part in directly in that song being such a wonderful song that's impacted so many people's lives. And so the 3 tips I want to give you when it comes to sleep. The first tip I want to give you is to treat sleep like a deadline. Treat sleep like a deadline. Leaders are great at hitting deadlines. We're great at getting our teams to hit a deadline. We need to get that strategy sorted. We need to get that priority that our leader has asked us to make happen. We need to get it happen by next week. Well, what would happen if you treated sleep like that? Just imagine if at 8 o'clock at night you thought about getting into bed 9 or 10 o'clock so that you might be able to get that 7 to 9 hours of sleep. What if you thought about that with the same level of intensity that you think about getting that strategy, getting that paper, getting that report done for work? Make it a priority. The second tip I want to give you, which I watched a great book summary on that book from a channel called Productivity Game, and he talked about this idea of making sure that you have that you address having enough darkness for sleep. And so for you, what could you do to make sure you're getting enough darkness to help you sleep? Because light really affects how easily we fall asleep. And so it's things like block out blinds, it's things like a mask for cutting out the light, it's things like those blue light glasses you can get. Being practical, by one thing that I do that I'd recommend is, if you're not too tied to physical books, listen to audiobooks, particularly last thing at night, because an audiobook means that you can have complete darkness, close your eyes and listen to the book, and at the same time you're still able to wind down a little bit. That's what I do. I listen to a fantasy book before I go to sleep, because I just love a really good sort of sci-fi fantasy book, and having it as an audiobook means that I'm able to be in complete darkness with my eyes closed while I'm trying to fall asleep. And then the third tip that I want to give you is around if darkness was one thing, this is the second thing that I really got from the Productivity Game summary that I saw, was he talked about making sure it's dark and cold. And so just something really practical for you with your sleep is to think about, what temperature do you sleep in? And if you live anywhere like I live in Australia, it gets pretty warm in summer. We're coming towards summer, and as I'm making this podcast right now, we're coming towards summer, and it's important to prioritize sleep by looking at how cool your room is. So if you're wondering, what can I do to invest in myself, maybe something you can do is to drop the temperature a little bit, because the research shows that the body sleeps better when it's slightly cooler rather than warm. And that's a challenge for us in Australia. It's expensive to get things like air conditioning, but is it something that you should prioritize if you're in a place where it gets warm? Because you know that if your body can be a bit cooler, you'll sleep better, which means you're going to function better, be a better leader, and get better results for your team and for your organization. So there are 3 tips on sleep. How much sleep are you getting on average? That's today's leadership question of the day. And I just want to thank you again for spending time with me, and for subscribing, following, liking, sharing. If you haven't done that, please do that now. Tick that button, hit that button. It really helps us to help more leaders to become the very best they can be. And thanks so much for spending time with me. I can't wait to catch up with you next time. Cheers.